Hello, everybody. Welcome along to another edition of Rabble Meets. And today I'm joined by football coach, politician, podcaster, a man who's, I don't know how he's got time to fit in this interview, to be honest with you, Craig Houston. Craig, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you very much, sir.
Listen, thank you very much for joining me. I like to start these kind of Rabble Meets by kind of not going back to the beginning because who remembers the beginning? But your early days of growing up, where did you grow up? What were you like as a Wayne? How were you at school? All that sort of stuff.
Yeah. It was. I had two very different upbringings almost. I was born in Linwood, which I'm eternally proud of. Great place, especially when I was a kid and the car plant was opened and everybody was employed and it was a council estate. And my primary school, I'd look out my front door and it was 100 feet one way, and I'd look out my back door and my high school was there. So that's where I was born. I loved it there. Great wee community. Still in touch with some of the boys from back in the day there. And when I was about 13, my dad was a draftsman. He was one of the very few people. There was a Scottish special housing estate, so it was all little wee squares of terrace houses. And our wee square, majority of the dads and the majority of the mothers as well were worked or had something to do with the car plant. But my dad was a draftsman, and he worked down in Greenock and Port Glasgow at the time. So that's how we ended up in Linwood. My family originally from Bridgeton, and then later on Brand Street and Kinnan Park, Cessnock area. So he moved out there when Linwood was sort of getting built up for the car plant because it was handy for where he was working at the time. He seemed to move further down the Clyde as he progressed in his career. And then my grandfather, he designed business, shoe repairers, and a lot of the older folk will maybe remember they had about a dozen shops, but the biggest one was in Arnott Simpson's in Argyle Street. When you used to walk into that shop, the whole back wall was a heel bar and key cut, and that was my grandfather's business. And he took no well. My dad got asked to help the business more, and he was a very good businessman. And it was an accidental entrepreneur. He was very, very clever at it, and he built the business even more than my grandfather had. So, we got a wee bit better off, and we bought a house up in Bridge of Weir. It was a new build house. And I laugh sometimes because I remember the figures, the time. I think our ex-council house was 25 to 30 grand's worth, and this new house we were buying was £100,000. Now, people watching this that are half our age, they'll be like, that you can't get a house for that price, but at that time it was massive. So you can imagine the difference in the sort of community that I was moving from, where people spoke like I speak today, and went up to Bridge of Weir, and I saw a slightly different person in society. And I think that's why these days I'm quite comfortable my own skin, and I'm very comfortable talking to both ends of the spectrum of society. I mean, I was just doing a talk in London Monday, and I was talking to Lord David Owen, and folk were looking at me aghast because the way I was talking to Lord David Owen. I was just talking to Lord David Owen as if he was my pal in the pub. And I think that's probably got a lot to do with my upbringing, where in a very early age I was I didn't know I was lower class and I was in a council estate. It was just me running about playing sojies and kicking a ball about, and then turned up in this other place. It was like something in the movies where people were having sleepovers and stuff, and it was a bit bizarre. So that was my early formative years, and I stayed in Bridge of Weir for I was about 12, 13 up to I was 21, got married early, and moved into the Big Smoke and became a Glaswegian.
Well, I mean, yeah. No comment on the Big Smoke yet. We will certainly get there. £100,000. Like that gets nowadays, as you know, for a house that gets you nothing now, doesn't it?
Yeah. Posh people have got cars that are dearer than that, but
That's very true.
it was like mental money. It may have been like 101,000 or 99,500 or something, but I remember just seeing the brochure. And my dad, my mum, the house wasn't built yet. It was a wee estate, wee exclusive estate with about 30 houses, and showing us the drawings and stuff. And I just remember seeing the price and I'm like, oh, what does that mean? That's got hundreds of zeros. And then obviously we were selling our house at the time, and I remember the figures was like 25, 30 grand maybe, and I'm thinking, that's quite a lot of difference. I was 12, I wasn't that clever, but I kind of realised £100,000 when I was 12, I'm 52 today actually, so that's 40 years ago. Thank you very much. So that would have been about 40 years ago, so £100,000 back then. So you can imagine, if you were going for what's an average price of a house? Let's say you had an ex-corporation house now, it was maybe 120 grand. Well, it was going up 4 times, so that's like moving into £500,000 house today. So was a big jump, especially for a 12-year-old that was just used to running about the bing, as we used to call it, kicking balls about, playing chappy and dodging the school and getting scudded, going for that environment to a house at £500,000 would be a big shock for anybody, and I was that guy back then.
What was that transition like then? Obviously going for Linwood to Bridge of Weir with your peers and stuff like that. I take it you were
I
I mean, it's easy for me to say. I mean, I don't know,
Yeah.
but were you a bit more streetwise than the rest?
Um, Possibly, but looking back, there was an ironic thing. I think we all go to schools and we have cross sections of cultures and people in our schools. And I remember having a talk with one of my old school pals, and somebody had get to jail for selling drugs. And guess what? It was for the posh school, no, the
No,
streetwise school.
of course
And
it
we
was.
were looking back, we're like, the posh school created more drug dealers and criminals than the alleged bad school. The bad school's full of decent geezers. Listen, I've got some loads of good pals for my time in Bridge of Weir. Never, that was I enjoyed it, but it was weird, and I didn't want to move school, and I kept going to my old school for about 6 months after the move, and I just get fed up one day and went, I'll just go to the local school, and I remember turning up. Now I went for a school that we were playing. I've got this mad memory of me, and I was a big boy. He was a goalkeeper for the local team at the time, which was Linwood Rangers, Derek Whittington, until the football casual culture became a thing, and Dell disappeared and never came back to the football because he missed too many away days and he loved it, right? And I remember us all being in music and playing chicken with the keyboards and throwing them at each other, and the wee poor teacher sitting in the corner going, what's going on? And fighting with the third years when we were in first year and all that. That was school, right? And we didn't have enough books and we didn't have enough stuff, and I moved to a school a few miles up the road that had carpets up the wall and all this equipment, and it was just like going into a different world. And it was like going to one of these schools you used to see in the TV in America. But the people, I probably had a chip on my shoulder because I thought, I don't fit in here, they're all snobs, they're all toffs. And there was there's more lunatics at Gryphie, maybe the percentage, no, but there was people there that their mum and dads were on the telly and doctors and stuff like that, but certainly didn't have that in Linwood. But it was a culture shock, and I probably had the chip on my shoulder for a wee bit longer than I should have, thinking I'm not going to get accepted here, and I'm getting treated different as a pupil than the other ones, the posh kids. But the reality is, it probably was they were just all waiting to try to find their way in life.
Now, obviously, we'll fast forward slightly. Obviously, you do your YouTube channel now. You've done a lot of stuff with the Sons of Struth. You're into your politics and stuff. But back at school, were you into school? Were you good at any kind of subjects?
Listen, I hated school. I genuinely, there was some subjects that I really liked, like maths. And see, at that time, you used to do arithmetic and maths, they were two different things. And I just couldn't understand why you had to teach people arithmetic. I just, I know how to add, subtract, and whatever. So that kind of interested me. Techie drawing interested me. History interested me until I got an absolute nutcase teacher. Our history teacher used to walk about at Gryphie. They had the cloaks and all that, but they only used them for prize givings and things. But this history teacher walked about with his on all the time. He was crackers, right? And I used to really, really enjoy history. But then I get this guy, and I kind of went, nah, that's not for me. And there was my sister. She was 4 or 5 years above me in school. And any of the teachers that had taught both of us told my mum and dad the exact same stuff. Craig is more naturally, he's got no natural ability than Fiona. Fiona has to really, really work hard and study. But Fiona will do better because Craig doesn't give a shit. And I think that was down to my sister signed a fig, and my son's exact same. He's an auditor and he followed her footsteps. They both knew early on in their life what they wanted to be when they grew up. Now, you're now sitting talking to a guy at 52 that's trying to be a politician, and I'm still don't know what I want to be when I grow up, obviously, because I've had that many different mad careers. That there was probably a bit of that, and I was like, everybody else was like, oh yeah, I want to study this because I want to go to uni to do that, and then do that job when I'm 25, and I was like, I don't know what to do in the morning. So I was naturally okay at school. I was intelligent. I always got good grades. I never spent much time studying. I didn't enjoy that, but I was all right at school, and I think a lot of the teachers, particularly when I look back and I went to the posh school, they seen me as a lovable rogue, and a lot of the teachers were quite cool with me. To be honest, there was a couple of total norbits, and I was told by one that I would never make anything in my life, and I thought, I'm 14. right? Shut up. But no, I was a good pupil. I was intelligent enough to handle school, and if I could rewind the clock, I would maybe have studied a wee bit harder and possibly went on to further education. But listen, I've had a great life, and it's not over yet. And no stick men at school and running out the door as soon as I could at 16 and going into work hasn't done me too bad.
See the amount of people that I know, including myself, who were told at school by teachers, you'll never amount to anything. I mean, I don't care if you're the worst guy in the class, you know, the guy that's just there to make up the numbers and interrupt everybody and isn't interested in learning. I think that shouldn't be, and maybe this is kind of falling a wee bit more on your political side now. That's not what a teacher's job is. A teacher's job is to make sure that every young person has got the best chance in life to succeed. And I don't know if that maybe that's changing now. When I was
Well,
back at school, things were a lot different, you know.
yeah, listen, I've been coaching kids football as a volunteer for 16 years now, and just now the wee team that I take, I see them for 1.5 hour sessions during the week, and then an hour and a bit on a Saturday. But those 3 years you've got them training, I can see now that the influence you can have in these kids, and it makes me think that the influence teachers have got, I'm sure, and I know some very good teachers that do have, help kids get positive outcomes in their life. But it came home to me about halfway through my coaching career that you can really influence these people. And I think as society we maybe need to appreciate that more, and we need to try and infuse people to be good educators. And being a good educator isn't just about knowing your subject and being able to deliver a planned training sort of teaching curriculum. It's about infusing people and try to encourage them more, and not just telling them how to add 2 + 2 makes 4. And I would hope for a better society where all adults, to be fair, anybody that comes into contact with kids can have an influence on them. It's just how we deal with them, whether it's a positive or a negative.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people think back to school and they've got that. You know yourself in life. The things that stick in your head more often than not are the negative things, isn't they? That's what tends to influence people a lot more than the positive. Like me and the missus will be sitting watching a TV show or a movie or something, and I'll pull out the negative of the movie and she'll go, "Do you just focus on the negatives?" I think most people do, to be honest. And I think teachers have a massive role to play.
Yeah.
And like I say, going back to like when I was at school, I mean, I just missed the belt, thankfully. But yeah, even stuff like that. So you mentioned then obviously you've had various jobs since leaving school. Was it a case of as soon as you were of leavers age, that was it, you were gone and out to work?
I was out the door. I couldn't get it quick enough. I'd started. I got a job in an ice cream van when I was about maybe 14, and I loved it. And so I had that job, and then I had a job with Candle Rigs Market. My uncle had wanted a shop. My dad's business, the family business shops. He used to do the heel bar and the Candle Rigs Market. So I used to go and work in there on a Sunday. And there was guys that were a year or two above me at school that were my pals. So they were out starting to work. And I remember between my van money and my money working in the heel bar on a Sunday, I was getting paid more than some of my pals who were doing apprenticeships, right? And I'm like still at school. And I quite liked that. I was like, all right. I suddenly was starting to put a value in money. I didn't care for stuff. To be fair, a lot of stuff, I don't actually care for money and riches and I've got some nice material things. I've got a nice car. I've got a couple of nice watches. That sort of stuff. But they're no my god. They're no what drives me. But I quite like the notion of the value of this thing. So I just wanted to go and work. And I left school and I went straight into a job that should have been for life. I became an admin assistant in the old Scottish office as a civil servant. And everybody that was there had sort of done the same. They started when they came out of school or college or university, and they were still there and they were 105. And I didn't even get a year out of it. I couldn't stand it. I just was like driving me mental. And I had a wee girlfriend at the time who stayed in the even posher part of Weir. We used to call it Up the Hill. And she stayed up the hill. And her next door neighbour came to me one day with a local paper. she went, Craig, that's an ideal job for you. She was into sales in some way, I can't remember what it was. And the local garage was a Rover garage, and they were looking for a trainee salesman. And she was like, I think you would be superb at this. And I went down, and I only got the job. I found out later in life, I only got the job because I pestered the life out of him. And he didn't actually want a trainee salesman. He had a trainee salesman, but it was the owner's son, and he was being a bit of a tadger, and he only put the advert in the paper to try and buck him up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I just pestered the life out of him because I went, that'd be a good job. I'd really like that. And I didn't want to do the job I was doing, plugged in an office all day. And off I went and just pestered the life out of this guy, and eventually gave me a job. So the irony was, I was put on, and this is how I found out. He told me one day, he went, did you ever figure out why I put you on a 3-month probation? I was like, I just thought it was normal. And he went, no, you came to me before I was 17, and he put me in a 3-month probation saying that I must get my full driving licence within 3 months. Because I started in February. I wasn't 17 until the March, so I couldn't even take a test, couldn't even take a lesson for a month. And he thought, there's no way this guy's going to get his full licence in 2 months. Well, I did, right? And so I actually was selling cars before I could even drive a car, which was a bit bizarre. It's like a sort of claim to fame. And that was me, and 90% of the jobs I had since were in sales, as a salesman, a sales manager, a business manager who would work out the deals, etc. I was a sales trainer, I was a sales director, and that was kind of what I'd done for a living in all different industries. The majority of it was the motor trade, but I worked in advertising, insurance, commercial cleaning, and probably a few that I forgot about. So that tend to be where I went with my life after that.
I don't want to presume anything, but you're talking about obviously when you passed your test. I would imagine when you sat your test, it was slightly easier than what it is nowadays. Is that fair?
Well, you didn't do a practical thing. You just the whole thing was, can this person drive a car? But like, see if I sat you in a car that I've passed my test in, you'd be like, what's that thing for? There's a thing you pull out. Oh, that was called a choke, right? Clutches weren't as easy to work as urban cars today. There was probably, but was it? I don't know. Well, what I do know is the majority of people at my age are better drivers than the ones that are my boys' age. So the actual thing might be harder, but it's no producing better drivers. So no, it wasn't a given. And I got a guy who was known in Paisley, because Paisley was our local test centre, who was called Taylor the Failer, because he just gave nobody a driving. And I was like, shit, when I turned up, I went, I've got Taylor the Failer. And a load of my pals were generally older than me, were like, this guy's an arse, you don't want him, he never passes any, he hates boys, he hates young drivers, and he doesn't get any as a licence in the first go, right? Well, I did, because I kind of had to. And that was that, But no, it was easy, it was just different. But we were driving different cars that were harder to drive, and we didn't have beeps at the back to tell us when to stop. We were doing 3-point turns and parallel parking, and we didn't have, we didn't have wee warning things flashing in your wing mirror to tell you there was a car in your blind spot. We didn't have that stuff. We didn't have parking cameras. We used to put, what the driving instructors used to do is, see, they still have them, but the old stickers, Arnold Clark or whatever the name of the garage. They used to stick them in a precise bit in the window. So when you were doing your reversing round a corner, when the curb hit one bit, you would start putting it on full lock. And when the curb hit the other bit of the sticker, you would start unlocking the right. So that was your driving aids, with stickers. So you go and get a kid today who's thinks they're doing a hard test and give them that set of circumstances, and then come back and tell me if it was easier.
No, it's honestly brutal. I mean, I passed my bus test when I was 18.
There is some effort.
Well, I had to. I had no choice. I had to get a job. So now, just come back to what you're saying, like, people who, I think it was before 97, if you passed your test, you can drive like a 7.5 tonner. It's on your licence.
I'll get a funny story about that very thing, right? Parliament's got a bus company, and it's a Rangers thing. We're getting into the fit one, right? He's got a bus company, and when we played Liverpool away 2 or 3 years ago in Europe, there was a gang of his going down in his bus. But he's got 52 seaters and all that. He's got this wee posh bus, right? That's all done up with. Aye, and Dougie's got, the chairs are like this, right? Big plush leather things, and you've got the walnut tables and all that, right? So we're taking the Bosch bus, and I think it's like 18, I can't remember exactly, maybe 16 seaters or something. So I was on the vape at the time, I'd gave up the fags, and I was going down to the front. Dougie was having a wee fly vape, just pals in the bus, innit? And I'm thought, what does this day? What does that day? Like me, I'm inquisitive, I want to know whatever it was. And we figured out I was the only person old enough on the bus to actually be able to drive the bus because of my granddad writes on my licence, right? So it was a bit of a standing joke. And when we went to Seville and stuff, I was Dougie's carer because he's crackers, right? And I was like, we all had, we were split up 2 or 3 different hotels in the Liverpool town centre. But Dougie is like, no, I've booked a hotel in Birkenhead because I want to get out of Dodge. I want to have the game and bugger off because if I don't, I'll get on it with yous and I'll never be able to drive the bus up the road, right? Because he's crackers, right? He won't even mind it. He'll watch this and he'll just laugh at me calling him crackers because he has crackers, right? And now what happened was it was my son. I can't remember I'd got corporate for me and my boy, and so we were all split up on the ground. And I came out the ground. We couldn't get any transport back into the city centre. Me and my boy and a couple of his pals walked it all the way back to Liverpool. But I was trying to phone my pals. Couldn't get a signal. So gets back. I just walked into the hotel I was staying at. And my phone went. And it was the boys that went down in the bus. Like, where are you? They call me Big Struth. Where are you, Big Struth? I'm just walking into the hotel. Like, well, we found a pub right next to the ground. I mean, it just took me 40 minutes to walk for the ground. I went, no, I'm fine. I'll catch you in the morning. I'm going into the hotel. Now, they read that as I'm going into my bed in the hotel. Well, no. I walked into the hotel and there was loads of Rangers fans at the bar. And guess what? I knew a few load of them. So we started getting on it, right? And then we were meeting in the Hilton the next morning. So we all met in the Hilton. And I'm thinking, Dougie, Birkenhead, he'll be bringing the bus here and we'll all get up the road. So Dougie walks in eventually, like a half-shot knife, and he hands me the keys of the bus. So what are you doing? He's like, well, we're in the pub, we try to get hold of you. You said you were just going back to the hotel to go to your bed. So we thought, you can do the first word and I'll get myself squared up and I'll do the last bit. So, Dougie, I never went in my bed. I was up to 4 o'clock. But we gathered that I was further on the road to recovery than Dougie. And I ended up driving the bus up the road, right? And that was all because of this licence that you've had. So it's a standing joke now. And then one of your football teams was going down to Newcastle on a tour. You know, they were down there, do a bit of training, play a game, go to a match, that thing, a couple of younger ones. And here, I didn't book the bus, the tour operator booked the bus, and it turns out it's Dougie's bus and it's his 52-seater. So Dougie, when he get the phone me, he went, I'm taking your kids down to Newcastle such and such a day. He's like, I take it you're coming on the trip. And I went, I'm not coming now. And he's like, how no? And I went, because I ain't driving a 52-seater back up the road for you, you crackpot. And Dougie went away and done the bus. But that was just somebody, but that's mad stories. The Rangers fans that go in these away games, they've all got, it's the stories and the experiences and the laugh you get. It's just, that becomes almost more memorable sometimes, particularly in the bad old days, than some of the games. And it's just all the madness that surrounded it.
Okay, Rangers then.
Yeah.
I'm always query when I ask this question because everyone's always got a different story. But earliest memories are Rangers. When did the bug hit?
I mean, I was always going. It was always Rangers was running about. It's my whole family were Rangers fans, and back then it was very unusual to have season tickets. Back then, this is pre-new stadium time, you know, and the wooden seats in the main stand and all that. But my granny and my grandfather had season tickets. And there was only one section, like to the right of the director's box back then. This is like late 70s, early 80s, pre-Sooners. There was only one section really that was season tickets back then. And so Rangers was always round about me. And I remember my dad, I think he'd done it just to try and be politically correct. Being in Linwood, he says, right, son, I think it was about 8, and he says, I'm going to start taking you to games. So what we'll do is we'll go and we'll see St Mirren one week, and we'll get a loan of my grand season tickets the following week, went to Ibrox. And then he was like, so would you want to go, and we'll just get season tickets next year for either? And I was like, we'll go back to that place in Paisley. I mean, it was horrible, right? And that was it. And I think my dad was obviously secretly pretty pleased. And that so that'd have been about 80, 81. And one of my early, I can't remember much about it, right? But we'd done the treble, and I had a treble winning scarf for 78, right? That was my first ever scarf, and my granny had bought me it, and I'll never forget that. But my wee granny, God bless her, I was always going to be a Rangers fan, but my wee granny was probably the one that inspired me to be a bigger Rangers fan than I might have normally been. She was just daft at Rangers, and we used to sit the four of us side by side in the main stand, the section J, when they were still alive. And she had been to Barcelona. She always said to me, if we ever get to a European final, you're coming with me, because I'm a lucky charm, because my grandfather had been to the 61 and the 67 finals, and we lost both, and she went to Barcelona with him in 72. So she was always taking credit for that he was bad luck and she was good luck. So she always said to me, we get to a European final, you're coming with me. And I don't know why I was her favourite, right? She had loads of grandmains, but I kind of own up to the fact I was probably her favourite now. And what the mad thing was, when we got to Manchester, my granny had passed away years before that. And my tickets, I got my tickets through the allocation for season tickets. So our 2 season tickets went to my dad's at the time. So my tickets were sitting in my dad's house, and the night before travelling down, I went over to pick my tickets up. And he went, oh, by the way, I found something in a drawer that you might want. This is the night before going to Manchester. I was like, what is it? And he went into the drawer, and he went, I found your granny's scarf. So I was like, what? How mad? Because I don't even know if my dad remembers my granny. My granny used to sit with me during the school holidays and public all the Rangers programmes and tell me about all the games, right? And he maybe didn't know my granny's promise to me was me and you are going to go to a European final together. So now that I had her scarf, I had her DNA with me. And I went to Manchester, me and my mate went to the ground quite early. And I remember walking up the spiral stairs there. At it was the Etihad now, wasn't then, City of Manchester, I think it was called then. And getting in and seeing the 2 big crests, and they had them in sort of balloons, big flags held up with balloons. And it was yours. And I just remember thinking, it's your club.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was used to watching every European final every year for a long time in my life, and it was always somebody else's club. Mm-hmm. I was like, that's your club. And then I've got my granny's scarf, and the whole thing became really emotional for me. I've never watched the game back. The only thing I remember at the game was the ball bouncing about the 6-yard line, and I'm sure it was wee Nacho had a chance of a shot, but we had a player in front of him and he sort of snatched it, and it never went on target. Other than that, I genuinely can't remember anything about the game. It was just such an emotional thing for me, and that was down to the scarf. That was what done it for me. It was the scarf. So my gran was the biggest influence on me, not becoming a Rangers fan, but becoming probably a bigger Rangers fan than I would have been if I didn't have my granny in my life. And I used to sit with her. I sat with her hundreds of games in the main stand, pre-Souness. It's torture. And then Souness came and the world changed for us all. And she was a big Cooper fan. Anybody said anything bad about Davy Cooper, she'd get the wrath of my wee granny. I tell you, and it didn't happen that much because Cooper was great. But listen, Davy Cooper never played every game, every minute, every game superb. The highlights they tell you are brilliant, and I love him to bits. He's my favourite ever player. But there was sometimes he maybe wasn't a bit off it or something, right? Or he'd try and use his right foot or something daft like that. And somebody would make a comment, and my wee granny would, she would just, no, you wouldn't slag Davy Cooper twice in front of you, that's for sure.
Do you know, it's actually, it's quite weird in a sense that you kind of started going to games and knowing Rangers and remembering Rangers round about a time when, all right, very early on success, and then for quite a few barren years in the 80s.
But you got to listen, we were semi-successful towards the end of the 70s, right? But all due respect, winning a treble in 78 when I'm 5-year-old, I can't remember that. True. I know it happened, and I kind of remember the scarf, and everybody was really happy. But I was like, all right. And then so when I started going, it was rotten, right? And by the way, we had some decent players. Do you know what I mean? You take Bobby Russell's, Coopers, wee John McDonald, all these, right? And so we didn't have bad, but for some reason we were just rotten. And I remember getting to a Skull Cup final, and this was a massive day in my life, right? That's how, it wasn't, we weren't winning much, and when we won anything, it was great. So when and a lot of people say when Souness came, and Souness, unbelievable what he'd done for Rangers, but somebody that I've had the real fortune of meeting and interviewing and doing a Q&A in public with was David Holmes. It was David Holmes that changed Rangers. And the thing that you've got the whole David Murray thing, and David Murray's kind of, you love him, you hate him, or you're neutral. There's no really much middle ground with David Murray, right? But the perception is a lot of people who actually even lived through that time think that David Murray brought Souness. Well, that's not the way it happened. Souness was brought by the previous regime, who was David Holmes, with Lawrence Marlborough shares. He was representing him on the board. And he changed my life as a Rangers fan. And I remember when we won the league that year up in Aberdeen, my mother wouldn't let me go. I had no ticket and I was desperate to go, and I was like, I think she tied me to my room or something. I can't remember, but I never get near Aberdeen that day when we eventually won the first title in my living memory. Not the first one in my life, but the first one that I remember. And we came back after that to celebrate in the next game. I can't remember who we played. We get the trophy. All the players were going around the park. And my dad at the time used to bugger off early for the games because he had these shops that he had to go and look up and get takings and stuff. And then he would come back and pick me up at the old training ground because with a season ticket, you had access to use the old training ground at Albion. All you needed was your season book at the time. So he used to pick me up there. So I'd like maybe half an hour after games. It was no rush. And the players have all done the lap of honour. And I think one of the last people in the main stand that day was me, right? And I'm, 13? And I looked to my left, and in the director's box, there was one person standing doing the exact same as me, and it was David Holmes. And I went over. I said, Mr. Holmes. And he came over to where the sort of wooden barrier is. And there's a famous photo of me, try to blow my trumpet, sound like a bit of dafty there. But it was a photo of me years later, having a quiet word in the ear of Sandy Easdale, and it made the paper that I was pointing his face, and I get sued for £200,000 a couple of days later. And it was the exact same spot, funnily enough. And this guy, Mr. Holmes, he came over, and I went and took my scarf off, and I gave it to him. And I went,
Your granny's scarf?
No, it was my own scarf at the time.
Just your own scarf.
My granny was still alive at this time. She'd kept her in. Anyway, so I went over to this 13-year-old boy, Mr. Holmes, and I gave him a scarf. Can I give you this? And he goes, what's it for? And I went, well, the players are all getting scarves. And you've done as much to get us this title as any of them, so you've not got a scarf. Can you? And I gave him a scarf. And that was when I was 13. It meant so much to me. And then I met him in the last couple of years, and we really loved that day and that story and that precise moment together again. And it was fantastic. But he changed my life as a Rangers fan with his vision of what Rangers should be, and it was a great honour to meet him a couple of three or four times over the last year and a half. An absolute fantastic gentleman, and I think if Rangers held that as a standard of what our directors should be like, then we wouldn't go far wrong.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. He doesn't get. I don't think he gets anywhere near enough credit for what he done for our football club. And do you think we're kind of in the same sort of position today? Because like I was saying, like obviously 78, 79, we done okay, but then the 80s kind of poor until, like you say, David Holmes brought in Souness. Are we in the same kind of position today? Obviously, there's talk of this takeover happening in June. A lot of money revolutionising the club. Are we in the same situation?
I think in certain circumstances, yes, but football's so different. What you got to remember the last time we were in that situation, Aberdeen and Dundee United were winning cups in Europe at that time. So the Scottish Premier League wasn't just about two teams, and it was a coin toss between Rangers and Celtic. So there was other factors there. What we've got to do now is be better than Celtic, and you'll win most of the trophies. That's the way it is just now, but that wasn't the case back then. So the revitalisation of Rangers back then was probably even a bigger step than it is now, because we only need to worry about one club. Whereas there was even Hearts should have won a double in that time, and they blew it in the cup final, and they blew it the last day of the season. They beat Dundee, and Celtic hammered St Mirren like 4 or 5-1 or something ridiculous, and they Hearts were winning that league all the way through. And anybody that wasn't a Celtic fan was kind of hoping Hearts would do it. They were the so near club. So they like to get quality teams, and Dundee United, as I say, were beating Barcelona's of the world, and Aberdeen were winning European Cup, Winners' Cup
Beating
finals
Real
against
Madrid.
Real Madrid. So, Scottish football was a different thing then. So it was probably harder because you'd all these teams to overtake. But football now, I mean, David Holmes was, he realised that we can make a lot more income in this thing, and that will help us buy the Terry Butchers and the Chris Woods and things. But it's even more so. If you get a league table at the start of the year and you put players' wages in their column and price order, that's kind of how your season will finish at the end of the season, bar the odd Leicester every decade, But is it harder? I don't know. It's different, and it's totally different. It should be easier because you've only got one club to kind of catch, whereas before then we had Hearts, Dundee United, Aberdeen and Celtic to leapfrog, and they'd done it almost instantly. So, it should be. And I think a lot of the problems we've got, yes, financially we could be better, but we can't be blaming Craig White or Green or even Ashley, because we're out of all that stuff now.
Yeah.
Like all that stuff didn't help us financially before, but now we don't have those things to blame. We've only got ourselves to blame. And if we can take in loads and loads of money and somehow nobody competing with Celtic, then we can't point the finger at anybody else. We've got to point the finger at ourselves and say it's our fault. But I think that's what we've done over the last 10 years. It was too easy at the start. It was right at the start saying, well, they created an absolute mess. We're going to take a bit of time to get this club back to normal. And it wasn't running functionally. It wasn't running like a football club. But we're 10 years away now. That was 10 years ago. So we're kind of away from that.
There was one season, actually, Craig, that we had a higher wage bill than Celtic.
I don't know, but
So there's no excuse.
I think it might have been more than one, to be honest.
Was it more than one?
It might have been. I sort of stopped getting myself totally engrossed with, and deliberately so, try to, I can't be bothered like talking about boardrooms. I mean, I do now, occasionally, maybe once or twice a year, when I just go, no, I've got an opinion on this. I'd like to share with people. Whereas previous to me to that, it was every day. That was my life, because we were campaigning to move a board on, and I try to still get away from it. But I'm quite sure it's more than one. I might be wrong. It's at least one. That's and that's mental. When you consider the income, and a lot of the income is down to the size of the stadium. Because if you've got 20% more seats, then you're going to have 20% more income right away on that line of your account. So we kind of need to catch up with the rest of it, and I don't think we've done a good enough job. We particularly likes the commercial side of things.
No, we absolutely didn't. You mentioned there about campaigning and stuff. I won't touch on it too much because you've probably spoke about this 100 million times. But for maybe one or two Rangers fans out there who have never heard of the Sons of Struth, could you just give us a wee quick explanation about what it is, how it started, and what it is now?
Yeah, well, it started off through guilt, I'll be honest with you. Because I'll tell you a funny story that I don't share often, right? I've got a wee mate of mine, ex-football hooligan, who used to coach together at a football club for kids. That's how our relationship as pals started, and in very many aspects we ended up more like brothers and pals through time. And I phoned him up one day, right? And I went, I don't know what this Craig White's doing, but I know he's not telling us the truth. He's not telling us the full story. There's something going on that we don't know. I said, see if you could get a group of your boys together to go to Ibrox to do something. How many could you get? And he went, well, between none and 50, depends what it is you want to do. And I came up with this mad idea, and I said, we turn up with ladders, we go to the Blue Gates, we get to the dugout in the front of the enclosure, and we tie ourselves there, and we phone the BBC, STV, Sky Sports, and as many newspapers we can, and we tell them we're not moving until he comes out and tells us the truth, because there's something stinking going on that we don't know as fans. And Sandy Chug, who's nuts, right, told me that day, you're nuts, right, you're bonkers. And I thought, well, if he's telling me I'm bonkers, I must be bonkers, right, because the starting point for him being bonkers isn't that high. And the twos sort of went, okay, well, let's not do that. But the twos were concerned. The next day was February the 14th, and we went into administration. And me and him met that night, and we were as emotional as everybody else, and we were feeling guilty. Now, if we'd had done what we wanted, or I wanted to do that night previous, we wouldn't have changed any history of Rangers Football Club. That thing that happened the next day was always going to happen, regardless of what we'd done. But the twos were gutted that we'd done nothing, and no Rangers fans had done anything. So we agreed that night that if ever in our lives, if we felt a bit strange about the direction Rangers Football Club was going in, we would at least do something. So that was a sort of pact we agreed that night, through guilt. Then we fast forward a bit, Green came along and all this stuff. And
Sorry, Craig. What gave you that feeling?
it was just a lack of information.
Right.
See the way my head works, right? And this is probably why I'm quite inquisitive and why I was able to do what I've done with Rangers and what I do now with politics. If you're given information and it doesn't sit together and fit together the jigsaw puzzles and make sense, I go, I need to make that make sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to find out, well, what is it we don't know? And generally it's because there's something you don't know. There's a part of the jigsaw missing and the whole thing doesn't make sense to me. And then, you know, that's where, you know, probably I've got quite an inquisitive mind, and it didn't make sense. And there was too many rumours and too much total bullshit coming for him. And he was a shady character, right?
Yeah.
And in hindsight, there's a photograph I refer to as the Reservoir Dogs photo, because it's like the Reservoir Dogs film poster, where you've got the gang just walking along the street. And the first day after Craig White took control of Rangers, we played Hearts, a beautiful summer's day. And there's a photograph of him and a gang of guys coming in, walking along Edmondson Drive towards the front door. Now, 3 of the people in that photograph turned out to be the people that put us into administration less than a year later.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in hindsight, you know, that was obviously part of the plan, because why would you have administrators in your first game, right? Think about it. So, actually, there was things that just didn't make sense, and that's where I was, and you know, listen, if I'd have climbed the gates that night, we wouldn't have felt guilt, so we might never have made that pact, and Sons of Struth might never have happened.
Yeah.
And when we started getting same sort of doubts about Charles Green, it just didn't add up to me. I could see a lot of things from my sales background that he was doing, and I thought, why do you need to do that? You don't need sales techniques to ask Rangers fans to buy season tickets, right? It was just daft things. And I was becoming a bit cautious and wary, and I met a guy that told me a bit more information, and it frightened the life out of me. And I phoned Chuck and I went, listen, you need to meet this guy I met yesterday, you need to tell us this story. And he told us both the same story. And we just looked at each other and went, well, we made a promise a year ago, we need to do something. So what we've done is we got some leaflets, and we thought we'll go to the next home game and we'll give you the leaflets. And people, we've then done our bit. We've got some fears, they're there, and whatever happens after that, it's no down to us. The Rangers fans will decide. And we thought that's what we'll do, and this thing will last a week or two, and at least then we don't have any, you know, we can sleep at night. But it didn't turn out that way. What happened was, not everybody, quite a fair chunk, weren't involved in it. Everybody, people were no one to listen to me. That's nobody telling them bad things about the club. That doesn't fit the narrative as a football fan. Football fans' default is tell me good things about my club. So, and even to this day, I still get the odd remark from people that weren't happy with what we've done, even with hindsight, and you know, evidently we were getting run by charlatans. And that's just, I get it, it's a human thing. A lot of people don't want to say they were wrong, and I understand that. It's not a problem. We'll follow up with anybody because of it. But we did get a bit of resistance. And then it started snowballing. And we had to get a name, and I thought, this Facebook was quite new to me at the time. I'm going to see if I can get, you know, run this platform. And I sat one day to build a Facebook page without a name. And I don't know, in the back of my mind, there was a Liverpool fans group called the Spirit of Shankly, and I met a guy from that, funnily enough, years later at an event in Newcastle, a fan event that I was asked to go and talk at. And I was thinking, I wonder if that was in the back of my mind, and it was SOS, and it was, you know, nice, and anybody that's a Rangers fan that knows anything about Bill Struth, they'll appreciate that his morals and his standards are dear and to us, and very much how we should still be running the club. And I just came up with the name Sons of Struth on a Facebook page, and then buggered off to go to a game. And that thing just exploded. And then newspapers were starting to get hold of us. And with all due respect to Sandy with his background was like, I'm not going in front of a camera. I'm not putting quotes in the paper. So that became my role. And then unfortunately, Sandy had a lot of personal stuff that over the next couple of 3 years, kind of, not deliberately, but I did, like, I wouldn't see him for months. And to be fair to the wee man, but I've spoken about this often, there were times when I really needed him. And when we got to those times, Sandy was always there on point. So it wasn't what it was meant to be. It wasn't meant to be the Craig Houston show. It wasn't meant to be any show. We were going to try and do a sort of guerrilla type movement where, it was just the name, Sons of Struth was the thing. But newspapers being newspapers and news stations, they need somebody to get a quote from. They want somebody in a camera. And me and Sir spoke about it, and he went, no, you need to do that. You kind of need to do that. I don't. I couldn't do it. And that's how I became this person. It wasn't by design, it was by accident. And this thing that two mates thought would be a couple of 3 weeks, maybe a month, turned into a 2.5 year battle, and quite a public one at that. And
how did that affect your life then? Because obviously, look,
ruined it.
I know what YouTube and social media is like nowadays.
Yeah.
I don't think Twitter was about then.
Twitter was
it
even worse
very
than it is
early?
today. Actually, Twitter was a thing, and I went on to Twitter and I went on to Facebook. And back then, Twitter was nuts, right? And you could put something on Facebook and click a button and automatically put it into your Twitter. So thankfully, I'm not going back on Twitter. So I used to put things on Twitter, and the folk that wanted to howl at the moon were howling at the moon without me knowing about it because they were over there. And Facebook was a bit milder. Not saying it's perfect, but because people normally get a photograph of them and their real name in Facebook, they tend to behave themselves a wee bit better. So that was how that worked. But I know it ruined my life, and it made my life, to be fair, in a lot of aspects. But at the time, I get arrested 4 times. I get sued for £200,000. I got my life threatened. The police came to visit me to tell me an Osmond warning. I didn't even know what an Osmond warning was. That means that they've got suggestions that your life's in danger. My life threatened. I had ashes at my back door. I had fans turning up outside in the middle of the night. So that was pretty shit. But I was talking to off air, and I put this mask on because Craig Houston couldn't cope with all that nonsense. Craig Houston would have jumped off the Erskine Bridge with that nonsense. And I put this mask on and became the Sons of Struth guy. And I used to be able to take it off, put it on. And I became quite good at that. But at one point, the mask wasn't coming off. And I always thought, when this is over, I'll take the mask off and I'll just go and get myself a job again. And it wasn't working. I was. People were helping me financially. I'm talking about 100 quid here and there. I'm not talking about predominantly my father helped me a lot because he's seen the state I was in, and he was like, "What are you thinking, Craig?" And at points I was thinking about giving up. I was ruining my life. I was homeless. I slept in my car for periods of this because it cost me a relationship, and I didn't see my kids for long periods of time. I lost a business that I had. It wasn't a massive business, but it was a business nonetheless. It was giving me an income. I lost all that, and my dad could see it, and he put a roof over my head, and he helped me. And he said to me, he says, "Look, I would rather help you than you give up. If I'm honest with you, if you can cope with it, please don't give up." But I said, I kind of need to just bin this and look after Craig and go and get my life back together and get an income and go and get a job, work for somebody. Don't try and start a business with all this noise going on. And that's where I was. So it was pretty shit. But I used to lie in bed at night and have almost panic attacks. And I remember one night couldn't sleep because I dozed off for a wee 10 minutes and woke up. And then my chest was just a pool of sweat, sweating like a beast. And all I could see was the faces. I thought, if I could stop this, there was loads of people that I gave hope to. And I could remember the faces, some of the protests and some of the events that we'd done. And it was particularly older guys who were like, "Craig, you're doing what I wish I could do, and you need to keep going." And I would see all these faces of these people. I wouldn't even know some of their names, and they would flash in front of me. And I thought, I can't hear this up. I wanted to, and probably at times it would have been the right thing to do for my own mental health and my own personal life, but I couldn't. I felt committed, and I felt I owed it to other people. But no, and I thought, when it's over, I'll take the mask off and I'll just be Craig again. And that kind of never happened either. I remember going to speak to somebody that gave me a great job before on the strength of a phone call, because I'd worked with him. He was a director of a firm, and he gave me a job over the phone because I'd worked with him previously. And it was a very, very well paid job. And I went to see him about getting me a job, and his face dropped. It's like, "Canny, you're that Rangers guy."
Yeah.
So the motor trade was my default setting. Wherever I needed a job, I just go into the motor trade again.
Mm-hmm.
And that door was locked. And I thought, shit, I never really thought about this. I thought I would just be back to being Craig. And shit happens. That was
So
a
has that still
consequence.
affected you right up until, well, obviously today is a completely different animal. You've got, and we'll come on to the YouTube channel, and I want to touch on the politics as well. But so had that affected you right up until before you even thought about the YouTube channel?
Yeah, it affected me. And I was like, shit, I'm no Craig Houston anymore. I'm
Mm.
in the eyes of many others, I'm the Sons of Struth guy now. And I tried to get jobs. I couldn't get them. And I'll be honest, I spoke to somebody in the club one day. I'd applied for a job in the club and get knocked back for it. And I was talking to somebody about it, and I went, do you know what's disappointing? I went, I've made myself almost unemployable. I don't have the energy. I don't have the fine. I'd no money, right? I was like, I don't have the money to start another business. I don't. I've got nothing. And what disappointed me was I did not do what I'd done to get anything off of anybody. I'd done what I'd done because I thought it was the right thing to do. But as a byproduct to that, I've kind of buggered myself here. And I went, and the way that I'd got knocked back for that job didn't make sense to me. It was as if some people just didn't want me to have that job. And I kind of understand that as well. Because why would you, if you're incompetent in your job, want a guy there that will go and tell everybody he's incompetent in my job, particularly when it's got something to do with Rangers Football Club? So I understood the logic behind it. I just didn't agree with it. And what they done was they put me on a consultant's contract and I helped do wee daft things. And I got the priceless sum of £1,500 per month before tax at that. And then I got a full-time job. And the full-time job, you would think, well, you kind of double your part-time job because you double the hours, and it didn't work out that way either. My first, after that, I got a £2,000 per annum increase by going full-time. So I'd made more money than that when I was 21-year-old, but I loved working for the club. But I was still making like a third of the amount of money I would have getting a normal job, which I couldn't get. So that kind of, but anybody that's a Rangers fan, you want to work for Rangers, of course you do. Some of the memories and experiences I had were just phenomenal, and I'll be forever grateful for them. But it wasn't all sugar. And once we came out of lockdown, I had no job, and then like, okay, well, we'll start again, and that's what happened.
In terms of the Sons of Struth, after everything's obviously passed and the club gets into a bit of a better position, if you like, could be argued, but it's in a much better position than what it was when the likes of Green and
Well, immediately there was no debate. We were in a better place because we had people in there who I'm quite happy to accept weren't going to steal off us, rob us blind, and give contracts to their pals, because that was evidently what was happening in them.
well, much better position. The Sons of Struth didn't kind of finish. Then you actually turned it into even more of a positive. If that's
Well,
fair.
it was a positive. The original incarnation of Sons of Struth was all negatives. We were always talking about bad things. Anytime the press wanted to talk to me, it was about some other nonsense that's went on at Rangers, some other contract that's came invisible, or some other stupid thing that the board had done. So it was all negatives. But myself and Sandy that started it were pals, although we're both Rangers fans. We were only pals through Rangers. We were pals through coaching kids football together from 2007, 2008 onwards. And I said to him, back then we kind of knew a few weeks and months before it that the game's up. It's just a matter of time now. The victory's touching distance now. And I said to him, what are we going to do with this? I'm not a brand, I don't mean that in a sort of showy off way, but a thing that people know and recognise. And I said, what about going back to what made us pals? And we'll coach together. We'll start a football club. And we thought, he was like, you're nuts, right? There's no way in the world you could make a success out of a football club that will only attract half the people in Glasgow, right? But well, let's do it. And then unfortunately, he lost his mother and his brother quite close time, and he said he wasn't in the right place for a long time after that. So again, we started something with good intentions, and Sandy. No, I don't mean that's in a bad way, right? We joke about it. He had other things to deal with, and I was left carrying the baby again. So started this football club 9 years ago, and that's been my passion for the last 9 years.
So how does, I mean, obviously, look, every ex-player now seems to have a football academy.
Yeah.
Stephen Smith's got one, Kevin Thompson's got one, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of football academies out there.
Yeah.
And I've seen an interview that you done that was actually, my little brother plays football at professional level, and I've seen throughout the years how much it's cost. My mum, my stepdad,
Yeah.
travelling to games, the football kits, the boots, they've all got to have the £150 boots and
Yeah.
all this and all that. Just on coaching for young kids now in Scotland, how difficult is it for working class people?
Well, this is a thing. Charlie Miller's got his football academy as well, but Charlie Miller's football academy is different from Kevin Thompson's and all that because they only provide coaching. Charlie provides teams the same as I do, right? So we've got teams playing at football as well, and they go to likes of Kevin Thompson and that for additional coaching. There's loads of people do that. That's not what we do. We're more traditional. Come and train on a Tuesday, Friday, play on a Saturday, and that's what Charlie does. And I've spoke to Charlie numerous times about kids football because it's obviously something that we both have a passion for. And every 6 or 8 years, the SFA will bring out another blueprint for Scottish football and how we're going to make it better. And they've kind of never found one to work yet. And I've got an even simpler theory. We don't need another blueprint. We need kids playing at football. Because some of the greatest football players Scotland's ever produced are your Davy Coopers, your Willie Hendersons, Willie Johnsons, even your Jimmy Johnsons, that type of player. Good, skillful football players. Now, I do not believe in a generation the genetics of the Scottish men has changed.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not as if we've stopped producing these people or giving birth to these people. But what football's turned into is a middle class participation sport. So there's whole chunks of kids that everybody played football when I was a kid. Anybody that wanted to play football could play football. But now because it's becoming a sort of middle class sport, because it is, there's finances attached to it. It's how do we get the Davy Coopers and the Willie Hendersons and the Jimmy Johnsons, right? How do we get them into the system? Well, we can't do it when you need to charge about 50 quid a month just to coach kids, and that's no businesses making profit. That's volunteers like me just paying their way, right? Mm-hmm. The £180 football boots, the extra trip that's £1,000 to go to Real Madrid, or as we done recently out in Madrid and train there. And these things don't come cheap. And there'll be, I don't know if Davy Cooper, Jimmy Johnson, Willie Henderson, if they were born today, they would be playing at football. I genuinely don't. I don't know too much about their backgrounds, but I know they were in the silver spoons, right? So how do we get that? Well, we need to kind of make it cheaper, make it affordable, if not free. But the councils charge that much. Mm-hmm. I pay to train on a Tuesday night, for example, and we've got 2 venues on a Tuesday night because of the amount of teams we've got. One of the venues is a council venue, and we pay £210 for that one venue. That's £800 a month for one venue, and we've got 1, 2, 3 venues that we train at. Right, I'll give you a kind of indication of what's going on here. So you can't do that free, but we need to find a way of getting kids playing at football either free or affordable, and that's the key here. And I'm not that clever. I don't know how to sort that out. But if I get to Holyrood, I'll maybe figure it out a bit better because I'll be able to speak to people in there that can do these things, and maybe make it a wee sort of side project for me to go. How can I improve that? And that's the whole thing about going to Holyrood. It's how can I improve my communities? Mm-hmm. Right, I'm not going to be the first minister, right? But what can I do in there as a person to make positive change for people? And if I can go up there for 5 years and make these people up there more accountable, make no burning the money that the good Scottish people give them in taxes and waste it in stupid things, right? Then that'll be a result, and making them accountable, and maybe the odd wee project can maybe help the way we treat our ex-vets, or the way we don't encourage our kids to be football players. There'll be loads of things, and I can fight people's corners. I'm kind of no bad at fighting people's corners and trying my best for them. But to get back to the football, that's my biggest thing that I've learned in 16 years with youth football. We don't have, and there's plenty, by the way, and there's loads of people thousands of people up and down the country, like myself, that are volunteers that give up their time for the benefit of other people's kids to try and encourage them to play football. But we don't have enough. We genuinely don't. And yeah, it's a different society. Nowadays, kids can play ice hockey. I mean, I remember when we were at Drumsagard, me and Chug, there was two kids, two brothers, left playing football to go and play ice hockey. It's like, when did that become a thing, right? Basketball, I know we've got a pal I know through one of the jobs I do, his boys left football to play basketball, right? So there's other things for kids to do these days, and there's maybe we're not as active as we were. We're not as active as we were in my day, but I still believe that football could do more to get even more playing at football. And
the SFA could do so much more in every aspect of Scottish football, if we're being brutally honest.
Well, I'll get another. This came up in a conversation with me and wee Charlie. We were talking one night about the daft, right? You're a kid at 6. You've got a kid at 6. You bring him to my football academy. If I go and let him play at 4-a-sides, I need to register him with the SFA. And you're like, what for? Why? Do I need to register that? He's not going to play in a competitive game until he's 12-year-old, right? I can understand why you need to register there for fairness, so that you're only playing registered players. So I get that, but a kid at 5, 6, what is the point? And it was Charlie that put me wise to that. He went, well, what happens, Craig, is you and me would register all these kids. So the SFA now say we've got a participation number. That then goes to UEFA, who get everybody's participation numbers, and they've got a kitty for youth football. They then distribute it in a proportional manner. So SFA want as many registered as possible because they get more money. So me and Charlie and thousands like us are going around encouraging these kids to play football, giving them a platform. They register with SFA. The SFA get a bag of money, and do you know who they give the bag of money to? The professional clubs. No, they need to use it for youth football. So they give it to professional clubs to help them run their youth academies.
Yeah.
So what's happening now is, so me and Charlie are working our arse off to get the money by, no, we're not going to get the money. We're going to, what we do attracts the money. They give it to youth club. Now, there's a lot of kids clubs who try to do this with their players. We don't. I've had 20 players in the last 5 years go to professional clubs, and we celebrate that. That's what we set this academy up to do, to help promote kids up there, right? And give them a good place to get their initial training done. And we'll get great relationships with the majority of the clubs that have taken our kids. And but they get the money. So we feed them, the players into them. We get the amount of players playing to generate the money that lets them run their academies. And do you know something? Out of all the players, I've never even had a bag of balls off a club.
How can they not use that money then, for even if they not even necessarily maybe to give to yourselves, give to the local councils and tell the local councils, right, pitch A, pitch B, pitch C, free of charge for volunteers, for little clubs like Sons of Struth or other academies out there.
There's 100 things you could do. Do you know what I mean? There is literally 100 things you could do to help. If you have no grassroots football, you have no pro youth academies, because somebody's got to feed into them, right? And you know, it's a bit bonkers to me. And I don't know. The pro youth system's got good things and bad things about it. And people come and ask me. Actually, I used to be a scout for a professional club. As well, so, and I've helped, not made them. They have the talent themselves. We just give them a platform. But I've helped a lot of kids get into pro football, and a lot of clubs come to me and say, "Look, I'm looking for an under 14 goalkeeper. Do you know anybody?" And kind of how it works. So I kind of know how the thing works. And a lot of parents come to me and say, "They're going to give me advice. There's a chance my kid's going for a trial here or there. What do you say?" And I say, "Well, I've heard a lot of bad things about pro youth." I went, well, if your kid wants to be a football player, it's kind of where he needs to go, right? So if he still get dreams and desires for that, then it's a process. Now, there are good things and bad things about it. There's probably more good than bad. It's not perfect, but it's the only process we've got. So you do need to go into it, and good luck. But you're not a professional at 12 if you sign with St Mirren. No, far from it, because St Mirren's under 13s might get one player, if they're lucky, out of that crop of players in that age group into playing their first team. But without getting into that process, you're never going to get to the end result. So it's kind of what you need to do. That to me is where, if we can get more into grassroots, we can then have a better pool to push upwards into the pro teams. But we need to get people, and we need to get them all. And if you go to any grassroots football club, right, here's a wee hint for you. Have a look at the car park.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? That's a barometer of people's sort of status in life, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, one, they've
Yeah.
got a car, right? And two, is it relatively new and did it cost a few quid? And you don't see many bangers, right?
No.
So, and you don't see many people getting the bus to training. So, what you're seeing is Range Rovers and BMWs and Audi, whatever. So that'll give an idea of who's playing at football. It's no rocket science.
Mm-hmm. Aye, it is. And like I say, I've been there with my brother since he was 8, all the way through to where he is now. And I think a lot of what a lot of parents, you can't teach parents, I suppose, but they have to be made aware of just how brutal football is, how brutal the pro youth system is. And like you say, just because your kid signs for somebody at under
Well,
12s, it doesn't
no
mean
matter.
anything.
Do you know what I've said to him, and I'm talking through experience with this because it happened to my own son. My own son was in the pro youth system a couple of years, and then one year they went, "We're not signing you again." Right? He never played football for 6 months after that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I say to people, the biggest negative out of this is you can be attached to a club, I think, signed for your 9 or 10, right? So there's this desire, and if some of them think if their kid's not signed up with their 9, that's that end of story. That's bonkers. We have far more kids go into the system after that initial age group than before it, right? But some people think if the kid isn't in it, Hamilton or Rangers or Celtic by the time they're 9, they're never going to be a football player, and that's just ridiculous, right? That's a crazy notion. However, right, so when people ask me for advice, which is no often, but when they do, and I'll say, look, so there is good and bad in it, right? But the biggest negative is your kid will probably not go at 9-year-old to St Johnstone. They've got 6 ex-Sons of Struth players up there now, right? At 12-year-old and go on to make a first team game for St Johnstone. At some point, somebody's going to say, you're no for us. Now, that might be after his trial. That might be after signing for 2 or 3 years. But that's not the end of the road. And the best example of that I can give is Andrew Halliday. Andy was told with Rangers at 14, you're not good enough for us. He, like my son, didn't play football for a while and then was encouraged to go for a trial with Livingston. And then ended up playing for Rangers and still playing at football and made a great career of himself with Middlesbrough and all these other clubs he played for. And that's a great example. But if your kid cannot accept that setback and that rejection, then don't put them through the process. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a big problem we've got in society today because everything's got to be cuddly and nice and smiley.
Yeah.
And kids often don't have the harsh realities of somebody saying no to them. And how dare you? Right? You get that sort of ethos with people's heads now, which is a bit alien to me. But that's a harsh reality of football. And there'll be a very, very small number if you look at the amount of kids that sign for a professional club as a kid and go on to make a first team match for them. There's probably more who join a club and go on to make their first team debut for another club. Mm-hmm. That's probably a bigger number of kids. So somewhere's going to tell you no. Somebody's going to give you a negative, and that if you can't handle that, do you know what I mean?
It's 1%, I think. 1% of all kids in Scotland that make it.
Yeah.
By
the way, it may be lower than that, mate.
Probably is lower than that.
But that's sort of kids that are participating. That's not even the ones the ones that go into pro youth will get a higher percentage because most of them don't even get that far. So if I've got 100 kids at my football club right now, and one of them goes on to play professional football, then we're probably higher than average.
Yeah.
But I think you're up just statistically and probability because the amount of kids we've got in the system now. The oldest one is a boy at Kilmarnock, boy Cody Martin. He's the oldest kid that we've got in the system, so he'll potentially be the first to break into youth team. And I'm hearing really, really good things about him playing in the year up and stuff like that. And that boy's a bag of talent. And hopefully I can get to go and watch him in his debut someday, playing for somebody, and probably get a wee bit emotional.
That would, as a coach, that would be phenomenal.
Aye, it's why we do it. Do you know what I mean? And it's nice to win trophies. I got accused of a parent the other day of being an egotist because I want my wee team to win a league. Thought, well, I kind of want them to win the league. I've won leagues before, right? But they're no my trophies. These winning leagues are great for the kids that are never going to go further on in football because that'll be the highlight and the pinnacle of their football career at 12 or 13, right? My trophies are all these kids that are at all these professional clubs. And there was a match the other day there at St Johnstone playing Hamilton, and under 16s, under 15s, 16s. There was 5 ex-Sons of Struth players playing in that same pitch in one game. Do you know what I mean? That's my trophies.
Yeah, that's mental. It's mental when you consider, like we've just discussed, you consider the amount of kids that actually make it through the systems. And by the way, you're 100% right when it comes to not just kids being able to accept rejection, but parents being able to accept rejection.
Well, there lies a bigger problem. I've had more issues with parents than I've ever
Yes.
had with kids involved with kids football. And I didn't start a kids football club to be a social worker for adults. And, to somehow manage them. I'm not interested. I'm interested in the kids. But in 16 years of kids football, any negatives I've got for that time was all evolved from parents.
Yes.
And
yes.
I don't understand that. Listen,
you see parents shouting at refs and all that, and you're like that.
Oh, listen, I know, and that's a tough one. We've all shouted at refs. We had a great laugh at the ref I had on Saturday, who was reffing us, and he's the Dorais manager, the junior team. Because like, an game of day ref, and he's like, no, he went, I'm going to, he's a coach, Craig Dorais. I kind of recognised his face, spoke to him before the guy. He's a great ref. So we're walking back to the changing room after it, and I was like, do you ever get booked? He's like, booked? I've been sent off 3 times this year, right? So we're all capable of it. That's a referee that's also a coach, and he gets caught out with that. So, that happens. But it's one of the, whenever, and it'll not be that far away, where I hang up my boots and I stop coaching kids because of other things in my life. And looking back, I've got some great memories. But any negatives have all been through parents. And I sometimes just look at folk that want to verbally abuse you and make allegations. The best, and this is why I'd never do it, by the way, when anybody falls out of a club, it's always either shite or stealing the money, right? It's just kind of the standard, right? So when we set up our club, I've got no access to your bank accounts. I don't touch cash. Everybody's fees are paid through banks. I don't have access to your bank. I've never had a checkbook. Don't ever cared. We've got a treasurer and we've got a committee, and I went, first day one, I'm not touching that because I'll be the one that will get the blame for everything. And I even had it last week, of accusations about money, and you're going, you're just having a bad day, right? Because your wee boy's upset, and that's somehow my fault. And that's kind of where it is. I've got 16 years of that. And you'll never change parents because it's their bubble, and most people's bubble doesn't go by their own gatepost. And I get that. Listen, I've had kids of my own. But when you're a coach, you've kind of got to make your bubble everybody's wins. And then when you're a chairman of a club and a founder of a club, you've got to make it not just that team, but every team, right? So my bubble's far bigger than anybody else's. I kind of get that. But you start to look at them and you think, why would you think it's acceptable to talk to a volunteer that's put hours for years into your kid just because there's something out of the club that you're not happy with? You think, why would I want to part with that? And people do need to take a good look at themselves, because everybody that I've spoke to ever that was an ex-kids football coach tell you the exact same reason that they stopped. And it's parents.
100%, 100%. Well, from the wonderful world of parents at kids football, Craig, to the YouTube comments, which can be a very fascinating and enjoyable place to be. First of all, what made you decide to get into the crazy world of YouTube?
Well, the initial thing, and then what it turned into, because it's not what I started it. There's a guy, James English, who's probably Scotland's most successful podcaster. James, a lovely guy. And I got to know him going to a few charity events, and then we done a thing with our football club. He's very into the homeless charities, and we done a thing one Christmas, and we took our oldest team out in the streets, and we got stuff to go in homeless, try and make our Christmas a wee bit more comfortable. And James was involved in that. And I've always appreciated what he does in his podcast, and I always thought, maybe I would enjoy that. So I actually sat down with James to get advice off him about how to do it. And I said, look, this is what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to become James English, right? But what I would like to do is utilise my phone book. Now, my phone book's for like ex-Rangers players, ex-Rangers chairmen and directors and ex-football hooligans, and all that's connected to Rangers because of what I'd done back in the day with Sons of Struth. And I thought, that's who I want to interview. So that's how it started. And a wee guy, Ricky Neal, who it's terrible, he does his podcast weekly with him, Charlie and Derek Ferguson. And he's got his own studio. So I was renting that off Ricky. And I was taking folk up there. I think the first one was Paul Murray, ex-Rangers chairman. And then I've done Behind Fair Players, done Wee Chug. That was funny doing him because his stories are just potty, right? I done like the Founders Trail guys, a couple of journalists who are Rangers, like Gary Ralston. Who else did I do? I've done another. Anyway, journalists with a Rangers connection and Rangers fans. If they're allowed to say that out loud in this day and age. And that's what it was doing. It was a hobby, and it was getting a following, and it started getting monetised on Facebook, which was quite good because it cost I had to pay Ricky for the use of a studio, and I couldn't edit things, so that it was costs involved. And as long as it was covering itself, it didn't cover itself, but it helped. So it just became my hobby, and I looked at it as some people pay daft money every month to play golf. I don't play golf, so this is my golf. It's my hobby, and that's what it started out as. So that's what happened there, and that was growing, and it was good fun. And then I woke up one morning, and I was never really that politically active. My politics up until then would be 2 or 3 weeks before an election. I would go and consider who I'm going to vote for. So I would kind of have to be interested in politics, and then the rest of my life I would like get on with it, and I would be worrying about paying my bills and stuff. So that was my politics. But I woke up one morning, it was November 2023, and Michael Matheson had ripped off the Scottish public for £11,000 for a phone bill while he was on holiday.
That's right.
And I thought, well, that's not right, and I don't like injustice. So I didn't have a camera. I mean, I'm using my laptop camera just now because I've bought cameras and stuff, but for some reason I can't link it up, so it's a pretty shitty picture you're seeing now. But I had my phone, because I had no cameras and stuff, because all this stuff was done at Ricky's. And I hung my iPhone over this laptop, and I moaned about Michael Matheson. And the video lasted 10 minutes, so I called it my 10-minute moan. And I fired it into YouTube. And thousands of people watched it. And I thought, what happened there? There was almost as many people. Now, when you put a YouTube interview, because you're not talking a lot about today, and somebody could watch this video in 5 years, it'll still be on YouTube and they might find it interesting, right? So, because we're not talking about something that's in the news today that's forgot about tomorrow. So although the interview ones had a longer shelf life, the political and news ones only have like a couple of days, and then there's another story, right? But they were getting more views in the first 24 hours than and I thought, well, that's a bit mental. So the next day I thought, maybe it's people like an old guy moaning. So the next day I thought, I'm going to give this a go again, and I done a 10-minute video about cyclists who I don't have a lot of love for when I'm on the road. And nobody watched that. And then the next day I done one about Rishi Sunak, and nobody watched that, because my audience was very Scottish, obviously, at that time. And then the next day, something else the SNP or Scottish Government done my nut in, and I done the fourth video. And guess what? Loads of people watched it again. And I thought, well, that's what people want to watch. That's what I'll do. And then the thing just went a bit nuts after that. And that's what, a year and 4 months away. And again, it's just one of these accidental things that I just decided one day I'm going to do something, and it's actually changed my life. And it's mental.
It's people don't understand, I don't think. And this is what I always try to get across to people. It's not just you don't just sit down and press record and go.
No.
There's so much work that has to go into that. And what you're saying, obviously, channels have their niche, if you like. Obviously, mine is Rangers, people that are interested in Rangers, people that have been associated with the club, whatever. That's my niche. How much work do you have to put in? But people hear 10-minute moan, and they think, oh, right, well, that only takes him 10 minutes. But it's always stuff that goes on in the background.
See from me hitting record to me putting a video out on YouTube and it's live, it's about an hour. But I've not got any stories in my head right now, so I need to go and research and find something that I want to do. That takes loads and loads of time. And then when it's done, there's all the stuff at the back end of that to try and put it on social media and drive it and other things. So you've got hours. I've seen me, and then some of my videos, it's just me talking. And then some of my videos, it'll maybe be me talking with photos overlaid and videos brought in for other people that have done, it's sort of GB News or something. And that takes a lot more time. So, if it was just that hour, I could put out 8 videos a day. Well, I don't, because I don't think my audience would want that. They kind of like 1 or 2. But I've tried putting more out, and I've not done it deliberately. It's just been days when there's been loads happening, and I'm maybe fired out 6 or 7, and some of them just falling their arse. So, I think I kind of have my limit in my audience, how many will watch a day. So, but no, and then, I've started getting out and about now, and I'm working on some stories just now. I mean, I'm working on a story that will eventually be a 10-minute. I've been working on the story and had meetings with people to give me information for weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that hidden hours. Do you know what I mean? It's not just 10 minutes. And that's where we are. But, I'm enjoying it. And, and if I can end up getting to Holyrood or the back here, then that's pretty phenomenal that in this day and age you can be 52-year-old, spend a couple £100 on a camera and a couple of pound, a few lights for your living room, and end up getting to Holyrood and the strength there. And I would encourage more people to take, hopefully, a wee bit of inspiration for that and go, you can do that, and get involved with politics, because there's no point moaning about politics.
Yeah.
If you think moaning about politics is going to change politics, I've got news for you. It's the exact same with Rangers. If we just sat in our ass moaning about Rangers would never get regime change. It needed some, and lots of people with Rangers, by the way, tens of thousands of people with Rangers. It wasn't Craig Houston that saved the Rangers. It was the Rangers fans that saved the Rangers. But we all had to get up off our arse and do something. And the politics is the exact same. Politicians will not decide to vote themselves out, because say, do you know what, we'll give the normal people a chance now. Right? They ain't going to do that. The normal people need to have a sort of revolution of their own and get involved with politics, or it will never change.
Well, let me go a wee bit kind of old school reporter on you then, for the last kind of just small portion of this interview. So Craig Houston, the politician, what is Craig's politics? What is his beliefs? What is it he wants to achieve within politics? And I suppose the biggest question anybody can really ask somebody who says, "Look, I want to go and do this for the people. I want to be an actor of change." What makes Craig Houston think that he can go into politics and make any change when it feels to people throughout the last 50 years that nothing's really changed?
A lot of questions in there. Might take
Sorry.
a minute to answer them all. But, well, what my journey, it started off with people just saying, "Why don't you?" And I thought, well, why don't I? And people making comments and videos and saying, "Look, you're the type of person that should be in Hollywood," right? I didn't have this ambition. Right? I didn't start this whole process to eventually go to Hollywood. I just started the process because I was fed up one day with the SNP, and that led to this. It's actually, history's repeating itself with what happened with the Sons of Struth stuff. I was an accidental spokesperson. I never vowed to speak for Rangers fans. It's just folk put a camera in, and I used to get that flung at me. Who decided you were to be the spokesperson of Rangers? Well, I've never pretended to be that person. What I've said all along is, here's what I believe in. See if you believe the same. We're going to have a protest on Saturday. You're more than welcome to come. That was it. Anyway. So that again, this is an unintentional thing. It's just a result, a consequence. And so I thought, right, well, let's do this. Could I do it? Well, of course I could. I could put myself up for election just like anybody else. You pay your £500 and you take your chance. So anybody can do that. But I thought, well, can I do it successfully? I thought, well, that's not a given, but with a bit of hard work, I could. So the first thing I thought of was, I'll be stand as an independent candidate. No, for independence, by the way, just in case anybody's not clear about the politics, right? But as an independent candidate. And then, I'll be very honest with you, reform became a thing when Nigel Farage came back just at the run-up to the election, and I thought, oh, I quite like this. And my intention at one point was, once the election's done, I'll go and speak to reform and say, "Excuse me, this is who I am, this is what I want to do, can I be a candidate for you guys?" That was where my head was. But the day before the election, without boring folk to death, I found out that reform weren't exactly what they said in the tin. And I was really disillusioned, because Scottish Unionists have had their leg pissed up by almost every political party and have been betrayed by most of them. And I thought reform were different. I thought reform were our great white hope. And I kind of thought, well, that's where I'm going to put my hat, if they'll allow me. And that was near guaranteed. I never got to that stage, because the day before the election, the penny dropped, and I seen what they weren't this great hope for unionists. In fact, I actually would argue that they're not unionists. So I was disillusioned. I was gutted. I thought my hope's just been pulled for me, because they're no, and I couldn't do. My morals wouldn't allow me to stand for a party that I didn't believe in. So I'd soon change my mind. And a lot of unionists have went that same journey, just over varying different time, because Reform were doing things that more and more people are getting pissed off with, and more people were leaving them. So loads of people have done my journey. I just kind of done it quite quick. And it's actually, again, it sort of mirrors what happens with Rangers, right? I went on this journey and went, shit, this is bad. And then loads of other people caught up, and I don't have a problem with that. So that's where I was. And then I thought, well, bugger it, I'm just going to be an independent. And then a guy, it was an English guy actually, that was a member of a party called the Social Democratic Party, which were a big party back in my youth. And he started talking to me about theirs. And I was going on holiday. And I went, well, I'm going to go away. I was away to Spain for a week. I says, I'll have a look at their policies and look more into this. And I read their policies. And I thought, if I was clever enough to write down on a piece of paper everything I thought a country should do politically, it would match that I've just read. There was nothing in it that I didn't agree with. There was some, maybe the odd wee word and stuff like that. That could be tidied up a wee bit. But generally, Unionist Party need to severely bring down the level of immigration. We'll deport people here illegally. We will look after the ex-service people. We put them to the front of the queue with public sector jobs when they come out of the army. Same with housing. Housing will be at the front of the queue will be families and ex-service people. Fantastic policies. So for somebody like me who's probably atypical Rangers fan, no, every Rangers fan's the same, by the way, I'm not that stupid, but you're atypical if you grew up what a Rangers fan is, you probably end up with me, maybe just know as ugly, but politically and stuff. And that's why it was attracted to me. And I thought, well, how did I know about this mob before? So that's what I'm doing. And we're going to have an election. I've been the interim chair of the party for about 6 months, and we'll be having an election soon for 3 positions, which are a leader of the party in Scotland, the chair of the party in Scotland, permanent chair, and a secretary. And I'll be putting my name forward for the leadership. And we're a democratic party. Somebody else might put their name up, and I might need to contest a leadership campaign. If not, I'll be uncontested, and I'll be the leader of a political party heading towards the Holyrood elections. Now, that journey for a guy in November 23 wasn't anti-politics. It's mental. And it wasn't planned. Again, it was just a result of a lot of consequences, things that happened. And you go, well, let's do this. And as far as, well, what will I do? Well, I don't think SDP will win the election, as in provide the next government for Scotland. Anybody that would suggest that needs their head seen. So I'm not going to be the first minister, but hopefully I'll be up there with a party with more than 0 MSPs. And it's holding people accountable. And when you sit in First Minister's question and the presiding officer moves on to the second question, if you have enough balls to press that point of order button and say, excuse me, Madam Presiding Officer, see that guy over there? He asked that First Minister a great question. Now, he's asked him twice and he's still no answered it. So you in your role of presiding officer, you're just about to go to the next question. But could you, as your role as a presiding officer, maybe take ownership of that and make sure he answers the question he's just been asked? That's the sort of stuff you can do. Yeah. The other stuff you can do is you can get in about the open up the bonnet and see where we're wasting money. And see wherever we're wasting money, we'll stop wasting money. And actually then we can put money into things we need. And it's important to the people of Scotland. And we don't need to tax people more to spend more. We can actually stop burning money to produce extra money in the budget. And the biggest things is saying, look, see this book of devolved powers that we've got? See it for the benefit of Scotland. Can we wring it dry and take every ounce of powers out of it and abuse it? Maybe even abuse it to the benefit of Scotland. Because what we do now and what we've done for the 20 odd years it's been in existence, we go up there and we talk absolute nonsense about stuff that are not devolved powers. I'll give you 2 examples. How many times do you see First Minister's questions or some debate in the chamber and somebody, normally Hamza Yousaf, wants to talk about Gaza, Palestine and Israel? Now, there is no foreign policy powers at all in that building. So why would we spend a minute talking about stuff that we can't deal with? And then how many times do we talk about even independence? When Nicola Sturgeon, it was proven in the biggest court in the land that the only people that can give us another referendum is Westminster. Mm-hmm. So if your driver is for a Scottish independence and you want to do that through a referendum, then I've got news for you. Go and organise yourself in such a way and bugger off down to Westminster and argue about it down there, because it's them that will make a decision. Don't spend another ounce of my time or another pound of my money coming up with white papers to argue the point in Holyrood, when Holyrood will not make that decision. Mm-hmm. So let's put all the bullshit aside. See the shite that we can't deal with as a parliament. Don't even waste time talking about it. And get in there with people that want to make Scotland better. Not want to make them independent, not even want to keep it in the union, because we can't even decide that bit, right? And are there that actually want to do constructive things to help the people of Scotland make Scotland better. And I'll have no problem working with people with different coloured rosettes on, if that's what they get up and do every morning they go to their work in that building. But I'll have a big problem with people who'll probably have yellow rosettes on or green rosettes on that want to talk shite. And they've got to be outed. And I'll every day when I finish my business in there, I'll go up to my office, I'll turn that camera on, and I'll tell the good Scottish people what went on there today. And when they don't want to answer questions, I'll be saying, hold on, I want to hear his answer. But even more importantly than Craig Houston want to hear his answer, see the good Scottish public who have got access to watch all these because we film every one of them and put them out live. They deserve to know his answer. So, enough of your shite. And I think people that know me and have seen the way I've worked in the past, that what I'm claiming I can do takes a set of gonads and takes a certain type of character. But anybody that knows me or has seen me in the past will know without even asking that I'll do these things. Because I'm no fear. I don't care. I genuinely don't care. I don't, I just like, I'll stay within the rules. I'll probably get banned a couple of times, right? But I'll stay within the rules. I'll use the rules to the benefit of me. And I will hold these people accountable for 5 years. And I'll guarantee that I will make differences. How many, I don't know. But I'll make differences to people's lives. Because I can't fail to do it. Being in there with that attitude. And unlike some of our SNP colleagues who stand up and say, I will not represent certain demographics of society. That's one of the most disgusting things I've ever heard a politician say. I'll be standing for election in my hometown. If I'm honoured enough to get elected, I'll not just be working for the people that voted for me in my area. I'll work, and not just the people in my area. I'll work for everybody in Scotland and put my hand on my heart every day for 5 years and say, I've done what's best. Well, I believe is best. Now, what you believe is best might be something different. But I don't care what colour, creed or fit the team you support. I'll do what's best, what I believe for Scotland. And I'll work hard for you. And I'll fall out with people. But I think that's what's needed. And I don't want to be the only Craig Houston in the building. I want more Craig Houstons to be in the building. And if we can get 20, 30 people like me, regardless of the colour of the rosette, just prepared to work for the people of Scotland, and I'm quite sure and positive we could make it a bit better. And it's progressively get worse over 18 years. So even to make it a wee bit better in 5 years, it's turning the tanker, which is the hard bit, and hopefully inspire the next election. Because by that point I'll be 67. I think then and then only. I've been campaigning for a long time, since 2012. I kind of think I'll deserve a rest. So I've no ambition to be a career politician. I just want 5 years shot at it to make a difference for our communities and Scotland.
How difficult will that be, though, Craig, in terms of the society that we live in now? I'm not a political person in the slightest, right? I made the point that for somebody like me, if I had the opposite view to you, right, and I was trying to have a debate with you about politics, and I was right and you were wrong, but it was me and you having a debate, you would wipe the floor with me. And if I was debating somebody on the other side and I was on the other side and I was debating them, they would wipe the floor with me because I don't know enough about what I'm talking about in terms of politics and stuff, right? But the world that we live in now, one of the very first things that you said there was, I want to tackle A, B, and then you said immigration, right? So the world that we live in now, the minute you use that word, the second you use that word, whatever percentage of the population are going, well, we know exactly what he's all about. So see, rather than people having open debate, discussion, sharing ideas, disagreeing.
Well, I can only give you my opinion on it, right? And podcast guests, the only two politicians I've had as podcast guests were Neil Hanvey, while he was an MP in Westminster, who's a separatist politician, and that's terrible, names just went out of my head. Lovely woman, Alba, ginger red hair. Oh wow, there you go. 52.
Can't help you here.
Ash Reagan, sorry, I do apologise. And Ash Reagan eventually ever watches this podcast, I expect a cheeky text offer, and quite rightly so. Now, that's the only two politicians I've had as guests. Both of them want an independent Scotland. Okay? But both of them, if that's where their lives go, when they go into Holyrood, and I'm honoured enough to go to Holyrood next year, there's loads of things that we agree on.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of social things. How society should be looked after. None of the two of them, and myself included, have got any ambiguity about whatsoever about what a man is and what a woman is.
Mm-hmm.
So if the gender thing came up again, then the three of us would stand quite happily side by side and fight against that. And that's because I'm an adult.
Mm-hmm.
So what we've got to get away from is tribalism. And I know when it started, this tribalism and everybody having to be in opposing parts of the spectrum, it happened at the referendum.
Yeah.
And before the referendum, I didn't know many people's politics because it's not kind of something that we spoke about. But now, everybody has to pick a side on an opposite spectrum. And everybody demands to know what everybody else thinks. And you're thinking, when did that become a thing? I used to go and vote. And when I was married at the time, my wife might ask me when I got up the road, who did you vote for? And we might have a 2-minute conversation about it. And I might get into my work the next day and 2 or 3 folk would be like, who'd you vote for, big guy? I voted him. Who'd you vote for? I voted for the other guy. All right, nobody fell out, right? No. But that's not the society we live in now. But the society we live in now is wrong. And we need to be adult and get on with it better. Because and again, even on immigration, if somebody had a deep-rooted thing and they thought, for some bizarre reason, having open borders and no accountability for who came into our country, because I'm not saying we should have zero immigration, by the way. Mm-hmm. I'm saying we need the less. Right? That's a different thing. And it's illegal immigration that's a problem. Asylum seekers are not even the problem. It's the fake asylum seekers that's the problem. I know a load of immigrants and I know a load of asylum seekers. They're good people, right? But it's because we've got too many illegal immigrants and we've got too many fake asylum seekers, the whole system breaks, right? So that's kind of where we need to be. But if somebody, for some bizarre reason, thought, no, we should have open borders and welcome everybody from anywhere, why could I not work in them if our theories on education were the same? But the society that we've created doesn't allow that. Because everybody's got to be poles apart and we've got to argue about stuff that's not on the table. Right? Now, immigration is not something that's controlled in Holyrood. So although that's my belief and that's my party's policies on it, unless I went to Westminster, I kind of never talk about it. But people, I think it's important people know where your belief systems are, where your scruples are. But and that's where I'm trying to work to the. At some point just take your rosette off, right, and leave it at the door, pick it up the way out. We're going to have a big adult debate now today about whatever. Now, can we just get some adults into the room and stop this crazy? We've had it, I believe, since 2014. It might have been longer. I've just never noticed it. Where it's this, everybody's got to be polarised and everybody's got to be loud and all that shit. And you go, really? How? Tell me how that's worked in Scotland, right? This is bonkers. This is all you need to know about the system we've got and how it's broke. The SNP have had control of that building for 18 years, either in a minority coalition or majority government. And in the 18 years, we've managed to lower the life expectancy of people. Now, apart from times of war, right, that's got to be impossible. If that was your aim, was to reduce the average life expectancy of anybody in any country in the world, you would probably need to kill people to achieve your target, right? The SNP have managed to do that in 18 years of governance by not wanting to lower they're just so incompetent. So the process we've got now, the system we've got now, evidently doesn't work. Now, you can argue about all the other things. You can't argue we're dying earlier, right? That takes some doing. I mean, that's not your goal, which I don't believe for a minute the SNP wanted to do it. But to actually achieve that shows you how a level of incompetence, unknown in modern times. So, what's the point this keeps going, cross our fingers and hope it gets better? Well, I'm fed up doing that. Now, will I be successful? I think it would be impossible for me not to have some sort of impact in that building. How successful? I can't guarantee anybody. The only guarantee I can give anybody is I'll go up there and try my best. And people will either have faith in that enough to give me a vote or not. And if they do, and enough of them do, we go to Holyrood and we try and make a difference in 5 years. And if they don't, I go to Portugal. It's half enough.
Craig, I've thoroughly enjoyed that. Thank you very much for coming on and talking to me. Brilliant.
No problem at all.
And
Thanks for having me.
Hopefully we'll get you back on soon. You
Maybe.
can give me a tour of Holyrood soon.
Aye, imagine that. Do you know what? That's a mad thing, right? And this happened at Rangers, right? See, when I walked in the building at Rangers, and even like, to a certain degree, John Brown, right? There was people in that building that went like, oh, great. But there's people in that building went, oh, shit. Because these people weren't very good at their jobs. And you knew that there was two characters now in the building that would go, you're a dick, right? And maybe that's potentially part of the reason why I'm not there anymore. But that's another story for another day, should I want to talk about that at any time in my life. Anyway, but exact same in Hollywood. There'll be people like that. Now, the people that are like that, oh no, what's going to happen is, put the kettle on for this happening. As we get closer to voting day, and if anybody thinks that guy's got a chance of getting in, that doesn't want me there, you'll start seeing newspaper stories about me. You'll start seeing hit pieces all over the place. Because these people will not want somebody in there that's, by the way, no a whistleblower hiding behind it, just call it that, you're getting it, right? And they will not want me anywhere near the building. But once I get it, and I'm kind of confident I can do this, right? There'll be people in there near civil service and stuff that's seen shite. And the exact same thing happened at Rangers, by the way. People on the inside start going, he's right. And he can sort shit out. And he'll come to me. And he'll point out things that I don't even know about that's holding the Holyrood as a function back. That'll happen. Because there's so many things that happen that are just history repeating itself and changing name for Rangers to Holyrood, right? It's incredible. It's just the same journey twice. So I'm better prepared this time. So that'll happen as well. Because there's good people up there. There's good civil servants up there, and they're in these NGOs and stuff that just go, I'm doing my job and I quite like my country, but this place is, and they've got a voice. They've got nobody to go put their arm around them and go, I'll sort this shit out. Right, well, I'll sort the shit out. Right, I've kind of done it before, I'll do it again. I've not got a problem. And I don't care how many people want to shout bad things about me. Never stopped me before, and there was plenty of bad things shouted at me. I was a homophobic, racist, bigot, and all that carry on before. I'm kind of used to that. I don't have a problem. I'll no struggle to get to sleep at night because some crackpot wants to call me bad names. We'll get there. We'll make a difference.
And I sincerely do wish you all the best
Thank you
for it. And like I say, we will speak again.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks very much for having me.
Thank you, Craig.